there are these elements of risk. I'm bringing up risks. It's my responsibility here to bring up risks that of some of the things that are unthinkable. The surprises are more on the downside than the upside. If I take the first four, the debt issue is not properly priced. The internal conflict, I think, is more likely to be a surprise. If there's a surprise, it's more likely to be a negative surprise. The geopolitical, probably more negative. I think probably there's a fear of war that will stand in the way, mutually assured destruction, but it's disorder. If I take number four, the climate issue and the cost of climate, just the money cost of climate, it's going to get worse, not better. So those
and you said the
four,
cost is 5% of global GDP.
I'm sorry?
And the cost is 5%
Yeah,
of global
estimated
GDP.
cost, whether if you invest in preventing the problem or you don't invest in preventing the problem, it's about 8% of global $8 trillion a year is estimated, 8%. Any way you cut it, the impact of global change in all different ways is it's very expensive. And then, and technology can cut either of those two ways. The issue about technology, I think it's going to be fantastic in being able to use it. So there's invest in it, but there's also use it. How will you use it to improve your thinking? The potential productivity benefits of that are enormous. I think that's the key thing. But also technologies, whoever wins the technology war is going to win the military war. And it's something that can cut both ways. So, and one of the problems about that is that it creates a concentrated wealth impact. So in other words, I think the big question that we all have is how are we going to deal with each other well? Because let's say that technology will produce the unicorns, and we're seeing it, how they produce the unicorns, and certain sliver of the population does well. In order to be successful, you need broad-based productivity, not like the way it's operating here in Singapore, that most people get an excellent education, and they've come out productive people operating in a world environment, in an environment where there's rule of law and the capital formation so that they can take their ideas and be productive. I think that that's what the future hinges on, even more than just the technology. Again, there's so much that's positive in the United States, and rule of law, capital markets, so many different things. Fantastic in many ways. However, I just want to again emphasize that there's a lot of risk because a limited number of companies constitute a lot of the performance in a country where we have to be concerned with the possibility of the orderly transition of power. I mean, presumably there is, but if you get into a situation, I remember my history and seeing these things happen over and over again reminds me really of the 1930 to 45 period when, four major democracies turned into autocracies or something. They're conflicts. We have that surprise risk, let's say. Then when you go beyond that and we think about that, there is a big difference between essentially, let's say, capitalism of a certain type and socialism of another type. I mean, so there's a classic left-right conflict. That left-right conflict is going to have significant implications for the markets, for a lot of things. So I think we are in an environment where there's the normalcy, and if we say everything goes on normally, we have a fairly balanced economy and so on. And then we have lurking over that, the elections, the debt issue, the geopolitical issue that we are uncertain about. The markets now are priced for wonderful things, by and large. And so we can't exclude the possibility that we don't have wonderful things. And that is the reason why any of us, we all talk about the issue of diversification. How do you diversify in such an environment? So the elections are a risk. I think the most optimistic that you can say about the elections is you're still going to come out of it with, in many cases, irreconcilable differences, not just about wealth, but about values. These are become irreconcilable differences. And is that going to cause the changing of the number of Supreme Court justices? How will this game be played? So it's a very uncertain time at a time where the assets are priced, it would seem, relatively appropriately, perhaps a little bit expensive, with the risk being more on the downside, it seems to me. But I just want to say there's an amount to invest. There's an amount to invest in the United States. There's an amount to invest in technology. If you're looking at the individual amounts and we think, where do you invest? And you look at the concentration of what it means in terms of how much do you invest in technology. So the key is how to diversify well is the most important decision people can make. How do I create a good, balanced portfolio so that no one place matters? Even foreign exchange controls. It could mean capital controls. There are these elements of risk. I'm bringing up risks. It's my responsibility here to bring up risks that of some of the things that are unthinkable. But those are things that one has to deal with. And that means, therefore, I think the importance of the proper diversification with consideration to those things. I found in my something like 50 years of investing that things that surprised me often never happen in my lifetime, but they happen many times in history. And so there were three big things that are now happening that prompted me to go back and study history, particularly to deal with the rise and fall of empires and, most importantly, the reserve currencies. And then I realized that there were five. And those five forces are everything we're going to talk about, and they're interrelated, and most of them evolve in cycles. So the first is the debt, money, economic cycle, how that works. Today we're going to have a Fed interest rate change. And that whole dynamic, what happens to all the debt? How will that be dealt with? What is the value of it? Is one man's debts or another man's assets? How is it as a storehold of wealth? These are important questions that are pressing questions. So second is the issue of internal order and disorder. There's a cycle related to that. And we see today that we are in a situation that is repeated in history at its extreme, in which there are irreconcilable differences between the right and the left, prompted by large wealth and values gaps that are irreconcilable differences. And they call into question even the orderly transition of power. So as we have an election that's coming up, we do ask ourselves, will there be an orderly transition of power? You know, even the notion that in the Constitution, the right to bear arms was the basis of the reason we have the gun rules that we do. And there are more guns in the United States than there are people. So we have a situation, I'm not saying guns and all that, but we do have a situation where compromise and democracy does not work the same way. So the second is that. The third, of course, is the great power conflict that Ambassador Kaplan was just referring to. And China, the U.S., and how that works. The fourth, throughout history, that has killed more people than wars, and been a bigger factor, is acts of nature. Droughts, floods, and pandemics have killed more people and been responsible for more domestic orders and international orders changing. And of course, number five, throughout history, has been man's learning, and particularly technology. So when we look at those five forces, everything we're going to talk about will be related to those five forces. They affect each other, and they evolve in bigger cycles, I think, than we pay attention to. So while we're going to pay attention to whether there's a 25 basis point point change or a 50 basis point change, everybody's going to get excited about that. We're sometimes missing those bigger pictures. So those are the five forces that I think we should explore in their interrelationship. Well, China's going through this classic cycle too. As Xi Jinping said, there's a 100-year storm on the horizon. China approaches it in an almost opposite way that the United States does. The United States is as individuals, creativity, bottom up. China's very top down. But there are big structural problems there. So economically, there's a need for a big restructuring. I won't get into all the particulars because it'd take me too long, but think about it there's the household sector, the business sector, and then the government sector. Households have had 70% of their money is in real estate. Real estate has gone down, stocks have gone down, salaries have been cut, there's job uncertainty, and so on. So they're holding their money in cash. Mechanistically, the only way to change that is to have a negative real interest rate, a significantly negative real interest rate, a positive slope yield curve, and some currency depreciation. That's it, the monetary policy. The fiscal policy issue is that most of the government spending is local government spending. 83% of the spending is local government spending. The problem is that the local governments got their money from land sales and also from borrowing money among companies that are in there. And so where do they get their money from? They have a debt problem. So they need to have a restructuring of the debt. It's a very complicated and politically charged thing, because when you do a restructuring of the debt, some people lose a lot of money, some people benefit from that. It's very politically destabilizing in a sense, and a monetary policy. So it's a situation which is at least as severe as the Japanese situation starting in 1990, and that has to be restructured. So that's the domestic situation, which is a challenge. And of course, it creates a political challenge internally. There's lots of disagreement and then political. If I go to the international, then the question is, what does it mean internationally? And what you're going to see, or what you are seeing, is that China's a big manufacturer. 33% of the world's manufacturing comes from China. 40% goes to the third world. And so I think you're going to see more manufacturing and the usage of technology in the third world because of the challenges in the United States and Europe also. So I think that's the picture. That can create a very difficult set of circumstances for China in that period. So that's the economic. Then the geopolitical has its own challenge. I'll just bring it up to speed to put that in context. Since for something like the last 35 years, I would write down all my decision rules. I call them principles, decision rules. I put them in equations that then were back tested, and to create artificial intelligence, but in expert systems, decision rules that would work in partnership with me. And at Bridgewater, that's the Bridgewater approach to making decisions. You have to have a game plan thought out that can be computerized. And so over that period of time, I've written those things. And now I'm at a stage in my life, a different stage in my life. I'm at a stage in my life that I want to pass along what I've learned. I'm 75 years old, pass it along. And so I've been doing that. And then it was asked, people ask me questions. I can't answer the questions. I have a capacity issue. And the exciting thought of being able then to take those and make a digital ray that can communicate. So I'm putting out a digital ray that will be, you'll be able to communicate with and have conversations with. And we had to do a lot of work in order to curate it, because I don't want it to hallucinate. And so how do I make it not hallucinate and give reliable advice? And we're best beta testing that. For me, that's a psychological kick, just even the ability to have it as a partner. I believe that digital ray as a partner, and go beyond it. There's a lot of intelligent people, have a lot of good principles. I believe that partner will be a partner for me and a partner for other people. And I think if we look at the future, we're going to be in a situation where you're going to have these a digital partner, and that will learn from you, and you will learn from it. And the days of doing it all in your head, where you think you're the smart person and take pride in it because you can weigh things in your head, that's obsolete in decision making. So that's what I'm doing, and I'm excited about it.